When I opened my front door, there was a Spider-Man backpack hanging from my kitchen chair. For 1 second, I thought I had the wrong house. The hallway smelled like macaroni and dryer sheets, and that sticky grape cough syrup smell children leave behind somehow. There were little sneakers by the stairs, a plastic dinosaur on my entry table, my brother's SUV in the driveway with one back door still hanging open, and a crushed juice box leaking into the cup holder. I stood there with my house key still in my hand. Then one of my brother's kids ran through my living room in socks and slid into the coffee table. "Dad," he yelled, "can we have pizza?" My brother, USA, came out of my kitchen carrying one of my cereal bowls. My cereal bowl, the blue one with the chipped rim. He looked at me like I was early to something. "Oh," he said. "You're home." There are moments when humiliation is so complete, it almost becomes physical. Not a feeling, a room. The booster seat strapped to one of my dining chairs, my mother's purse on my counter, a pack of diapers beside the fruit bowl, 3 extra toothbrushes already standing in the cup in my bathroom. They had not come to ask. They had come to settle in. My parents walked out of the kitchen after that. My father had his hands in his pockets. My mother was carrying a dish towel from my drawer like she lived there. "We were going to call you," she said. No, that was the first lie. Because they had already unpacked. I looked at my brother, then at the suitcases near the stairs, then back at my parents. "What is this?" My father sighed. The exhausted sigh he used when he wanted me to feel difficult before I had even spoken. "Your brother and the kids are moving in for a while." I laughed. Just once. Because sometimes your body makes the wrong sound when something impossible happens. "What?" "He needs stability," my mother said. "And honestly, you're alone anyway." Alone anyway. Like that made me temporary. Like being unmarried meant my house had become public property. My brother would not look at me. One of his daughters was sitting on my couch coloring on the back of an unopened electric bill. I said, "You can't just move into my house." Then my father looked right at me and said, "It's not really your house." There it was, the thing underneath everything, the real family story. My brother needed. So I disappeared. My mother smiled then. Not kindly. The small, tight smile she got when she thought she had already won. "You'll make room," she said. "You always do." If you have ever stood in a room that belonged to you and watched your own family talk to you like you were the guest, you probably know this feeling. Because I stood there with my house key cutting into my palm, while my father told me to leave it on the counter when I went upstairs to pack. By the next morning, they had called me 82 times begging me to come back. I looked down at the key, then back at my father. "Are you serious?" He laughed. "Dead serious." Then he nodded toward the counter. "Leave the key." I should say this before I tell you the rest. What happened is true. A few details are softened because after enough years, every family kitchen starts to blur together a little. The same fake fruit bowl, the same refrigerator covered in school pictures and passive-aggressive notes, the same way people say, "We're just trying to help," while moving your life around without asking. I sometimes use AI to help me keep the order straight when I tell this story. But none of that changes my father telling me to leave my own house key on my own counter. None of it changes my mother calling me a leech in the kitchen I paid for. If you have ever spent so many years being called the strong one that everybody forgot strength is not the same thing as consent, you probably already know how some families only praise the child they can take from. My brother, USA, was always the one people made room for. When he was 10 and broke my bedroom window throwing a baseball inside the house, I had to give up part of my birthday money to help teach him responsibility. When he got his first DUI at 23, my parents paid the lawyer and told everyone he was under stress. When his wife left him, they said she had abandoned him. When he forgot to pick his kids up from school twice in 1 month, they said he was overwhelmed. There was always a softer word waiting for him. Stress, pressure, bad timing. For me, there was only one word. Independent. My parents said it like a compliment. "She doesn't need much. She's so self-sufficient. She's the strong one." What they meant was, "She'll survive whatever we do." I was the daughter who drove my mother to colonoscopies and sat in the waiting room for 4 hours with a stale granola bar in my purse. I was the daughter who handled my father's insurance paperwork after his surgery, because he couldn't figure out all that online stuff. I was the daughter who bought school shoes for my brother's oldest when he forgot, and then pretended the money came from Grandpa, because I knew he would be embarrassed. I did all of it. quietly. The house had been mine for almost 6 years. After my grandmother died, there had been months of confusion about what would happen to it. My parents talked about selling. My brother talked about maybe needing a place eventually. Then one Sunday, my father came over with a folder and said they had decided to let me have it. Let. That word. As if I was being handed a favor instead of receiving something my grandmother had left me. I remember standing in the empty living room with the keys in my hand and crying. My mother hugged me and said, "Now don't get too attached. It's still family property." I believed her. That is the embarrassing part. I believed her so completely that even after I paid every bill, every tax payment, every repair, some part of me still acted like I was borrowing my own life. There was a neighbor across the street named Mr. Donahue, retired mailman, always outside watering his driveway for some reason. The year after I moved in, he saw my father in my yard telling me where to plant new bushes. My father kept saying, our house, our front yard, our kitchen." Mr. Donahue looked at him for a second. Then he looked at me and said, "Funny. I thought your name was the only one on the mailbox." I laughed, too fast. Then I changed the subject. Because by then I had gotten very good at helping my parents tell the story they liked best. The story where my brother needed and I provided. The story where my house was never fully mine because if it was mine, then one day I might stop making room. That night, after my father told me to leave the key, I went upstairs and packed one overnight bag. Not because I planned to surrender. Because I finally understood I was going to have to stop arguing with the story and start looking at the paperwork. I drove to the motel off Route 80 because it was the first place I could think of that still had one vacancy light on. The room smelled like bleach and old carpet. There was a floral bedspread, a lamp with a crack in the base, and one of those little coffee makers that always looked like it had survived a fire. I sat on the edge of the bed with my overnight bag on the floor and my house key still in my hand. I had not cried yet. That was the strange part. I kept waiting for it. The panic. The humiliation. The part where I called my mother and said, "Fine, you win. Just let me come back and we'll figure something out." But underneath all of that, there was something else. A small, hard feeling, like a lock turning. I opened the nightstand drawer looking for a pen. There was a Gideon Bible, a folded motel map, and an old utility bill I had shoved in there months earlier when I stayed after my father's surgery. My address was on it, my name, only mine. I stared at it for a long time. Then I called the number on the back of the folder I had shoved into my overnight bag, without really thinking. The estate attorney answered on the second ring. Not because it was late, because he was old and apparently never slept. When I said my name, he went quiet. Then he said, very carefully, "What happened?" I do not know why that almost made me cry. Maybe because he did not say, "What's wrong?" Or, "Are you upset?" Or, "Are you sure?" He sounded like somebody who had been waiting years for exactly this call. I told him. Not all of it. Just enough. My brother, the suitcases, my father telling me to leave the key. The attorney sighed. A tired, unsurprised sound. Then he said, "Do you still have the blue folder from your grandmother's estate?" I looked down at the overnight bag. The folder was there, bent at one corner, still sealed with the old rubber band around it, because I had never really looked through it after the house transferred. I pulled it out. Inside were tax records, insurance papers, the deed, and underneath everything, one letter in my grandmother's handwriting. "My sweet girl, if you are reading this, your parents have finally decided your brother's need matters more than your right to stay standing." Again. I stopped breathing for a second. The motel air conditioner clicked loudly in the corner. Outside, somebody slammed a truck door. I kept reading. "This house belongs to you. Not because you are alone. Not because you are easier to disappoint. Because you were the only one I trusted not to turn love into ownership." My eyes burned then. Not because of the house. Because somebody had seen it. Years ago. Before I had. There was another paper under the letter. A copy of the trust, highlighted. The property had been transferred to me completely 5 years earlier. My parents had no ownership, no authority, no right to move anyone in. There was even a clause. No relative may reside on the property without the written consent of the homeowner. The homeowner, me. The attorney said, "Your parents know this." I looked down at the page. Then at the key in my hand. Then back at the page again. No, I said. I think they convinced themselves it didn't matter. The attorney was quiet. Then he said, "Would you like me to contact the locksmith and file notice of unauthorized occupancy?" The room went still. Unauthorized occupancy. Such cold words for something that had happened in my kitchen beside a bowl of bananas and my mother's purse. I thought about my brother's kids asleep in my guest room, about the Spider-Man backpack, the booster seat, the cereal dust already on my couch. Then I thought about my father laughing when he told me to leave the key. "Yes," I said, very quietly. "Yes." The locksmith came before dawn. The attorney arranged everything: the locks, the security code, the notice, the house alarm tied to my name only. I did not go back. I sat in the motel parking lot just after sunrise with a paper cup of terrible coffee and the key in my lap, while the sky turned pale over the highway. For years, I thought that key meant I belonged there because my family allowed it. No. The key belonged to me long before I believed I had the right to use it. If your parents move your brother into your house and tell you to leave your own key behind, what would you call that? Family? Pressure? Or theft with children standing in the hallway to make you feel too guilty to stop it? At 7:14 the next morning, I woke up to 82 missed calls and my mother screaming that they couldn't get back in. At 7:14 the next morning, my phone started vibrating so hard it rattled off the motel nightstand. I opened one eye. The room was still gray. The coffee cup from the night before was sitting on the dresser beside the blue folder. For one stupid second, half asleep, I thought maybe I had dreamed all of it. The kitchen, the key, my father laughing. Then I looked at my phone. 82 missed calls. My mother, my father, my brother. 3 unknown numbers. 2 voicemails from the security company. 1 text from the locksmith confirming the recce was complete at 6:42 a.m. The first voicemail was my mother. She was crying. No, not crying. Screaming through tears. "What did you do?" she said. "We're locked out." I sat up slowly in bed. The floral motel bedspread slid into my lap. Outside, somebody started a truck. Inside, my phone kept buzzing. My father next. His voice was furious. "How dare you do this to your brother? There are children here." There it was. Immediately. Not "how dare we." Not "we're sorry." Not "come home." Just children. As if the existence of children turned theft into love. I listened to 3 more messages. My brother sounded confused more than angry. He said the alarm had gone off when they tried to come back from breakfast. The new code did not work. The front door key no longer fit. My father had started yelling at the locksmith in the driveway. The locksmith had asked whose name was on the property. Then, according to my brother, nobody said anything for a long time. I laughed then. Not because it was funny, because I could see it so clearly. My father, standing in my driveway with his hands on his hips, still trying to perform ownership into existence, while a stranger looked at him like he was the one who did not belong there. There was a text from my mother too. "You are humiliating this family." No, that was the correction. They had humiliated me. They just never expected there to be paperwork. If you have ever had your family treat your boundaries like cruelty because they were so used to taking whatever they wanted, you probably know this feeling. Because I sat there in that motel room with 82 missed calls lighting up my phone and realized something terrifyingly calm. For the first time in my life, they were the ones outside begging to be let in. The attorney called after that. His voice was practical, steady. "The notice has been delivered," he said. "Your parents and brother have until noon to remove personal belongings. After that, if they remain on the property, it becomes formal trespass." Formal trespass. The words made me flinch. Not because they were wrong, because they were so much smaller than the real thing. The real thing was my mother unpacking my brother's children into my bathroom. My father telling me to leave my key. My whole family acting like I was removable. I drove back to the neighborhood around 11. Not to the house, just near enough. I parked at the end of the block beside the little park where I used to sit when I was angry in high school, because it was the only place nobody could follow me without making it obvious. From there, I could see my driveway. My father was pacing. My mother was standing near the garage with her arms folded. My brother was loading suitcases back into the SUV. The kids looked confused. One of them was carrying the Spider-Man backpack. Mr. Donahue from across the street was outside watering his driveway. Again. He watched my father for a second, then looked over and saw me in my car. He lifted one hand. Just once. Small. Like he had known all along whose house it was. Then my phone rang again. My mother. I answered this time. The second she heard my voice, she said, "How could you do this to your own family?" I looked through the windshield at her standing in my driveway. My driveway. Then I said, very quietly, "How could you move into my house and call me a leech?" She was silent for one whole second. Then she said, "You know this house was never really yours." No, even now. Even standing outside locked doors with her purse still trapped in my kitchen and my father shouting at the security company, she still believed if she said it enough times, it would become true. I looked down at the key in my hand, then back at the house. "My name is on the deed," I said. "You laughed when you told me to leave this behind." I held the key tighter. "Now you know what it feels like to stand outside and not be let in." Then I hung up. I met them in the parking lot of the attorney's office that afternoon. Not at the house. I was not ready to stand in my own kitchen with them yet. The attorney's office was in one of those low brick buildings beside a dentist and a nail salon. There were dead leaves caught against the curb. My father was already there when I pulled in. He was standing beside his car with his arms crossed. My mother was crying in the passenger seat. My brother was out of the SUV with the kids. The children were eating crackers out of a plastic bag and watching cartoons on an iPad. They looked tired. That part hurt. Not because I thought I had done something wrong. Because children always look tired when adults use them as furniture in their own arguments. My father started talking before I even got out of the car. "This is insane," he said. "You had no right to lock us out." No. I almost admired it. The way he could still twist a thing completely around and hand it back to me, like it had always been mine. I shut the car door. Then I held up the copy of the deed. The paper shook a little in my hand. Not from fear. From finally being tired of carrying this much silence. "I had every right," I said. My father looked at the paper. Then away. "That's just legal nonsense." Legal nonsense. Like ownership was only real when it belonged to him. My mother got out of the car then. Her mascara was smudged. She looked smaller than she had the day before. Not kinder, just smaller. "We didn't think you'd do this," she whispered. There it was. The truth. Not we didn't know. Not we misunderstood. They had known exactly what they were doing. They just thought I would do what I always did. Make room. My brother finally came over. He looked exhausted. He had one of his daughter's little pink jackets hanging over his shoulder. "When were you going to tell me?" he asked. I stared at him. Then I said, "Tell you what? That the house was mine?" He blinked. Actually blinked. Like the idea had never fully reached him before. Mom always said I know what Mom always said. For a second, nobody spoke. The wind pushed a fast food wrapper across the parking lot. Somewhere behind us, a dentist's door chimed open and shut. Then my father said, "You're really going to do this to your brother and those children?" No. There it was again, as if my brother had simply fallen from the sky with 3 kids and nowhere to go. As if he had not known for weeks. As if my parents had not moved him into my house while I was at work and then called me a useless leech in my own kitchen. I looked at my brother. Really looked at him. At the dark circles under his eyes. At the way he would not meet my face for more than a second. And suddenly, I understood something ugly. He had spent his whole life inside the same story I had. The story where he needed and I provided. The difference was that I had finally stopped believing it. "I'll pay for a hotel for the kids for 2 weeks," I said. My mother looked up fast. My father opened his mouth. Then I held up my hand. "Not for you," I said. "For them." The attorney stepped out of the building then. He carried a folder under one arm. He nodded at me first. Then, at my parents. "Mrs. Harper is willing to arrange temporary accommodations for the children," he said. "After that, further access to the property will require written permission from the owner." The owner. My father flinched like he had been slapped. My mother started crying harder. My brother looked down at the little pink jacket in his hand. Then, very quietly, he said, "You really own it?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. because there it was, the whole rotten center of it. All these years, the taxes, the repairs, the weekends painting the porch alone, the broken water heater, the roof, the mailbox with only my name on it. And still, somehow, nobody had believed the house belonged to me until a man in a suit said it out loud. Yes, I said. I always did. My mother took a step toward me then. Please, she said. We're family. I looked at her, at the damp tissue in her hand, at the pearl earrings she wore when she wanted people to think she was the kind of woman who deserved things. Then I looked down at my key, the same key my father told me to leave on the counter, the same key that had left a mark in my palm all night. You only remember we're family when you want something from me, I said. Then I put the key back in my pocket. And for the first time in my life, I did not make room. 3 days later, I went back to the house alone. I sat in the driveway for a minute before I got out. The SUV was gone, my father's car too. The house looked exactly the same from the outside. White shutters, crooked mailbox. The porch light I kept meaning to replace because it flickered every time it rained. But when I opened the front door, the silence felt different. Not empty, just mine. There were still traces of them everywhere. A fruit snack wrapper under the coffee table. One tiny sock behind the couch. Crumbs in the back seat of the dining chair where the booster had been strapped down. I stood in the middle of the living room with my keys in my hand and looked at the dent in the couch cushion where my mother had been sitting when she called me a leech. For a second, I could hear it again. You're alone anyway. You always make room. Then I looked around. At my books back on the shelf, my blanket folded over the arm of the couch. The blue cereal bowl with the chipped rim back in my kitchen sink where it belonged. And I realized something. They had spent so many years acting like I was temporary in my own life, that I had started treating myself that way too. I unpacked slowly. Not boxes. Myself. I took the extra toothbrushes out of the bathroom cup and threw them away. I washed the fingerprints off the hallway mirror. I put the electric bill back on the kitchen counter where I always left it. Then I took the key out of my pocket and set it in the little dish by the front door. The same dish my father nodded toward when he told me to leave it behind. No. I stood there looking at it for a long time. The key had always felt like permission. Permission to come in. Permission to stay. Permission that could be taken back if I was too difficult, too emotional, too much trouble. But that was never true. The house had been mine all along. The difference was that now I knew it. My brother called that evening. I almost did not answer, but I did. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "The kids are okay." I leaned against the kitchen counter. Outside it had started raining. The porch light flickered once. "I'm glad," I said. There was another silence. Then he said, "I didn't know." I believed him, not completely, but enough, because my brother had spent his whole life in the room they built for him. The son who needed. The son who took. The son who never had to ask where anything came from because somebody always made sure it appeared. He had been wrong, but he had also been used. Just differently than I had. "I know," I said. He exhaled. "I should have. Maybe. But I was too tired to teach him the whole truth in one phone call. So I just said, 'You can't let them do this to you either.'" After that, neither of us spoke for a moment. Then he said goodbye. A week later, Mr. Donahue came over while I was dragging the trash cans back from the curb. He nodded toward the house. "Quiet again," he said. I smiled a little. "Yeah." Then he looked at me, over the top of his glasses. "You staying?" Such a small question. 2 words. But nobody in my family had ever asked it like that. Not as a challenge. As if the answer mattered. I looked at the house. At the porch. At the window over the sink. At the key waiting in the dish just inside the front door. "Yes," I said, "I am." For years, I thought what I wanted was for my parents to panic. To finally understand what it felt like to be pushed out and treated like you did not belong. But that was not really it. What I wanted was this. To walk through my own front door, without feeling like I had to earn the right to stay. If you have ever been treated like you were removable in your own family, I hope you remember this. The people who call you selfish for having boundaries are often the same people who depended on you never having any. And if there is a key somewhere in your purse, your pocket, or the bottom of a drawer that still feels more like permission than belonging, maybe tonight is the night you hold it in your hand, and remember that your life does not have to be something other people let you keep.